The spring of 2014 had arrived, carrying the sweet perfume of newly opened flowers, the moist brilliance of leaves, and the promise of longer days filled with light. But facing the tranquil immensity of Lake Tahoe, Vin Diesel didn't share that same promise of renewal that the season brought. Before him, the lake rested like a perfect mirror, reflecting a sky so blue it seemed hand-painted by a divine artist. The landscape was postcard-worthy. Flocks of birds cut across the horizon in synchronized flight, their silhouettes dancing against clouds white as cotton. The gentle wind swayed the tops of century-old pines, creating a natural symphony that echoed through the mountains. The golden light of evening caressed everything with an almost unreal warmth, transforming each leaf, each stone, each ripple of water into an ephemeral work of art. Inside, however, Vin was a turbulent sea, a whirlwind of emotions mixed in a silent weight that not even the beauty of that scenery could ease. It was as if he carried an internal storm that cruelly contrasted with the serenity around him. Despite being one of Hollywood's most recognized faces, owner of one of the most profitable franchises in cinema history, and surrounded by fame that many only dream of, Diesel carried an emptiness that no award, million-dollar contract, or box office success could fill. Since Paul Walker's death, each day seemed heavier, slower, as if time itself had changed rhythm. It wasn't just the physical absence of his friend that tore him apart. It was everything that came with it. Shared memories, plans left unfinished, conversations that would never happen again. But there was also the constant and relentless pressure from studios, hungry for another box office record, always demanding more, always wanting to repeat the success formula. A new script, more impossible chases, more spectacular explosions, more adrenaline. But for him, none of it made sense without Paul. It was like trying to complete a puzzle with the most important piece lost forever. In his mind, Furious 7 had closed a cycle with dignity, sealed by a tribute that moved the entire world and left even the toughest critics with tears in their eyes. Continuing the saga would be like racing without destination, accelerating without knowing where to go. What he really wanted now was to completely change course, perhaps dive into dense police dramas, complex espionage thrillers, or philosophical science fiction. Anything. As long as it didn't involve high-speed cars, impossible chases, and the constant and painful reminder of who was no longer there to share the adventure. The weight of responsibility was also crushing. Hundreds of people depended on the franchise to work: technicians, producers, distributors, cinema owners. Millions of fans around the world eagerly awaited the next chapter. But how to explain that the ship's captain no longer wanted to sail? How to say that the passion that moved everything had transformed into obligation? Vin picked up a small, smooth stone from the shore and threw it into the water, just to see the concentric waves expanding slowly, as if the lake breathed and sighed along with him. Each circle that formed seemed to carry a bit of his anguish away, but soon the surface returned to its mirrored, impassive state. He stayed there, completely motionless, lost in his own thoughts that circled like waves in the lake. That's when he heard, clear as the sound of water hitting stones, "What's eating you, V?" The voice came masculine, familiar, too close to be imagination. Diesel turned abruptly, his heart racing like a supercharged engine. This wasn't possible. It simply wasn't. He looked around with wide eyes. There was no one behind him, no one nearby. He turned his gaze to the cabin he had rented for this necessary escape. Paloma, his wife, was inside, talking on the phone with animated gestures while the children played on the wooden deck, their laughter echoing softly across the property. Just him, the immense lake, and the warm breeze that was beginning to cool with the approach of night. Vin shook his head, trying to dispel the strange sensation. Stress. It had to be accumulated stress, his mind playing tricks. Maybe it really was time to seek professional help. He sat heavily on a wooden bench that someone had strategically positioned to contemplate the view. The wood was smooth from time and use, warmed by the day's sun. He rested his elbows on his knees and buried his face in his calloused hands, hands that had gripped steering wheels on dozens of sets, that had greeted thousands of fans, that had comforted friends in difficult moments. He had never felt so mentally exhausted, as if his creative energy had been drained along with Paul on that cursed November day. Maybe it really was time for a sabbatical year, put all projects on indefinite pause, take care of his fragmented mind, and spend more quality time with his daughters. Watch them grow without the constant pressure of being on some set or promotional trip. Yes, that was exactly what he would do. The decision seemed to bring momentary relief. "Aren't you going to answer, my friend?" the voice insisted, now with an amused tone he knew all too well. The shiver ran up his neck like an electric current. Every muscle in his body contracted. He slowly turned his body, almost afraid of what he would find, and this time there was no doubt at all. No room for denial or rationalization. Sitting beside him on the bench, with the same relaxed smile as always, with the same blue eyes shining with life, was him, Paul Walker, alive, smiling, wearing a simple white shirt and worn jeans, as if the last months of mourning and pain had never existed. The world stopped. The sound of birds, the wind in the trees, even his own breathing. Everything was suspended in that impossible moment. "You aren't here, you can't be." Diesel forced a nervous laugh, his voice coming out hoarse. "I'm going crazy. You don't want me to be here, is that it?" Paul raised an eyebrow with that typical playful expression. "After so long calling me in your thoughts? Man, it's what I want most in the world, but I know it's physically impossible. You died, Paul. I was at your funeral. I saw your body. I consoled your family. Impossible, V." Paul laughed softly, a sound Vin hadn't heard in months, and that made his heart race even more. Since when does that exist in our vocabulary? It's all a matter of mind, of perspective. You always said it yourself. Impossible is just another word for challenge. Vin remained silent, staring at him with a mixture of disbelief, joy, and terror. He was exactly as he remembered, the same relaxed posture, the same way of tilting his head when speaking something serious, even the same discreet cologne he used. But there was also something different, a serenity that didn't exist before, as if Paul had found a peace he had always sought in life. The evening light touched Paul's face exactly as it would touch any living person, creating the same shadows, the same reflections. If it were a hallucination, it was the most perfect and detailed one he had ever experienced. "What's your problem, V?" Paul asked, leaning forward with genuine concern. "Why so much affliction in your chest? I can feel your anguish from here." The words came out in a rush, as if a dam had burst. "I don't know what to do, Paul. I don't know who I am anymore without you by my side. Since you left, I'm completely adrift. My thoughts have no direction, my dreams make no sense. The first and only decision I made with clarity was to end the franchise for good. Without you, it simply makes no sense to continue. It's like trying to make a family film without family." "And why doesn't it make sense, V?" Paul asked softly, but there was something in his voice that suggested he already knew the answer. Vin felt his eyes fill with tears he had held back for months. "Do you need to ask? We were together from day one, from that script reading in 2001. We shared absolutely everything. Joys, sorrows, mistakes, victories, fears, hopes. We spent more time together in those 13 years than with our own families sometimes. You guys were my chosen family, and now you're not here, never will be again. What's the point of continuing? What's the sense of accelerating if you're not in the passenger seat to share the adrenaline?" Paul let out a light laugh, that same melodious sound he made on set when he wanted to break tension between scenes, when he noticed everyone was too serious. "You have the others, V. Jordana, Tyrese, Luda, Michelle, and more importantly, you have yourself. You love this franchise as much as you love your blood family, maybe even more. You can't stop now, not when there's still so much to tell, so many adventures to live." He paused, studying his friend's face. "Make 4, 5, 6 more films. You have creative ammunition for that, brother. How many times, around the 3rd or 4th film, did you come to my trailer with shining eyes talking about grandiose plans for the franchise's future? And now you want to give up right when everything was getting interesting? Don't make me sad, V. Continue. Bring joy to people who love these films, who wait for them like children wait for Christmas." "But Paul," Vin tried to interrupt, his voice choked. "You have Dwayne and that gigantic ego of his that, deep down, hides a heart of gold. You have Michelle with all that incredible feminine strength. Tyrese with the humor that saves any bad day. Ludacris with technical intelligence. Statham bringing that British edge. Kurt Russell as the wise veteran. Charlize with all that intensity. And you can still bring more talented people. Hollywood is full of actors wanting to be part of something special. Don't tell me you lack human or creative material." Paul stood up, walking a few steps toward the lake, hands in his pockets. When he turned back, there was something different in his eyes. A gentle but firm urgency. "You have the best ideas in your head. Genius screenwriters willing to collaborate, budgets that other directors only dream of, studios that trust you blindly, and a beautiful family of actors by your side who would do anything for you. Make it worth it, V. Don't enter this descending spiral of self-pity and suffering. You are much more than that. You've always been stronger than you imagine. Remember when I thought about giving up back then in the fifth film, when I thought I had lost the passion? You held me, reminded me why we started this journey. Now it's my turn to hold you, to remind you who you really are. Vin stared at his friend, trying to absorb every word, every expression. The lake seemed quieter now, as if all of nature was listening to that impossible conversation. The wind had stopped completely, creating an almost sacred silence. He wanted to say 1,000 things, that he missed the conversations between scenes, the jokes on set, the plans they made together, the complicity they had developed. But no words could come out of his emotion-tightened throat. Paul returned to the bench, sat down and placed a firm hand on Vin's shoulder. The sensation was completely real. The weight, the warmth, even the texture of skin. Go on, V. Continue our story. And when you enter that set, when you shout action for the first time, take me along. I'll be there, always. In every dangerous curve, in every explosion, in every family moment. Always. Vin stared at Paul with completely moistened eyes, shining with unshed tears. The question had been stuck in his throat since the cursed day of the accident, growing like an emotional tumor. And now, even without understanding how this was possible, even questioning his own sanity, he decided to let it out. Why did you get in that Porsche that day, Paul? Why the hell weren't you driving like always? You were the pilot between us two, the one who really understood cars. Why did you let Roger drive? Paul looked away, staring at the calm surface of the lake, exactly at the point where minutes before Vin had thrown the stones. Small ripples were still moving slowly, like echoes of a larger disturbance. The silence stretched for long seconds, long enough for the soft sound of water lapping stones and wind in trees to be the only audible answer, until he spoke, with a deep serenity that made time itself seem slower. "Do you really think it would have made any difference, V?" he asked, without taking his eyes off the horizon where the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with orange and pink tones. "When the guys upstairs decide to pull your file, it doesn't matter where you're sitting in the car. If your time has come, if your role in this dimension has ended, you have to go. It's that simple." Vin felt the terrible weight of words pierce his chest like bullets. "It's okay, V," Paul continued, turning to face him with a serene half-smile that didn't exist when he was alive. "Those who keep trying to rationalize, looking for culprits and explanations, are our earthly minds, our human need to make sense of what doesn't have any. But from this side, everything is different. Everything makes more sense. It was my time, at least that's what I believe now. And it wasn't by chance that it happened right after we finished the 7th film. It was as if I had fulfilled my mission." Vin breathed deeply, feeling air enter heavily into his lungs. The lump in his throat seemed to have tripled in size. "And how is it?" he asked with the voice of a curious child, almost whispering. "What is there to do there? What have you been doing on the other side?" Paul laughed, that light and genuine laugh that Vin knew so well, that he heard in his happiest dreams. "Films, man," he replied, turning his body completely to face him. "I keep acting. There are many good people here, V, actors from all eras, directors you only dreamed of meeting, screenwriters who created the stories that inspired you to start. And the best of all, we don't have box office goals. We don't have deadly deadlines. There's no money or egos involved. So everything flows absolutely harmoniously. It's pure art, pure passion. Really. How so? We can make 3, 4, 5 films simultaneously. Here is completely timeless, V. There's no physical wear, no aging, no financial or personal losses. It's wonderful in a way that's hard to explain with human words." Paul made a significant pause and completed, looking directly into his friend's eyes. "Each one lives exactly the reality they want, that they choose. It's similar to there on Earth. The difference is that here, nobody chooses to keep suffering. Nobody clings to pain. Happiness is the natural state." Vin cracked a crooked smile for the first time in months, trying to lighten the crushing weight of the conversation. "And women?" he asked, arching his eyebrow mischievously. "How does that work there?" Paul laughed loudly, a laugh that echoed across the lake and made Vin feel for an instant that he was back on set, between one scene and another, when they had these silly conversations that relieved tension. There are millions, V. Women of all types, from all eras, more beautiful than you can imagine. But here it doesn't work like you're thinking. Physical sex as you know it, there doesn't exist. What exists are energetic connections, soul fusions that are infinitely more intense and satisfying than any bodily pleasure. Vin laughed loudly, the first genuine laugh in months. So there it's more boring than here, man. Paul went along with the joke, shaking his head with amusement. Seeing it from that earthly angle. It's true, but when you experience it, you'll understand it's like comparing a candle to the sun. There was a brief silence, but this time it wasn't heavy or uncomfortable. It was that comfortable silence of old friends who don't need to fill every second with words. Then Paul spoke, lowering his voice and loading it with pure sincerity. You know, V, before anything else, I wanted to thank you from the bottom of my heart for the tribute at the end of Furious 7, and for calling my brothers, Caleb and Cody, to complete me digitally. That was indescribably beautiful, worthy of everything we lived together over those years. You showed the whole world what I already knew from day one, that we were much more than work colleagues. We were real brothers. From the beginning, I knew it, felt that special connection. Vin felt the lump in his throat tighten again, tears threatening to overflow. You would have done exactly the same for me, man, without hesitation. Paul smiled, somewhat shyly, briefly lowering his head. Maybe, and laughed at himself. Honestly, I don't know if I would have had the same creative capacity to take emotion to that cinematic level. You were always the most creative guy among us, the true trailblazer, the visionary. That's what I loved most about working with you. Making films by your side was like enjoying a Sunday afternoon with best friends, relaxed, fun, weightless. I never felt the pressure of million-dollar budgets or studio expectations when I was on set with you. For me, it was pure joy, pure, serious play. You brought me that lightness, taught me that working can be the most fun thing in the world. Keep it up, friend. Make everything worthwhile. Vin looked away to the lake, watching the last ripples dissolving at the shore. Really, it was too good. Now it's really boring. Too much pressure from executives, too much demand from media, too many exaggerated egos from some actors, I won't mention names. I'm mentally exhausted, man. Paul gave a short laugh and teased lovingly. Said the man who has the biggest ego I know in Hollywood. He made a theatrical pause. That was never a problem for you, my brother. You always handled these challenges easily, always knew how to deal with difficult personalities. It's one of your superpowers. Vin smiled genuinely, shaking his head. At that moment, he realized that however surreal and impossible that situation was, he was hearing exactly what his soul needed to hear. Vin breathed deeply, looking at his friend from top to bottom slowly, as if he wanted to mentally photograph every detail of that impossible encounter for eternal memory. Then he smiled sideways, feeling a spark of the old complicity. "Since you're here so mysteriously," he said, scratching his thoughtful chin, "give me some valuable tips for the 8th film's script. You always had the most brilliant insights." Paul laughed loudly, leaning back on the bench and clapping once. "Ah, so that's it? The guy almost kills the franchise completely and now wants my exclusive consultation from beyond the grave." "Exactly." Vin got excited for the first time. "You always had the best instinct for what worked. Remember when you suggested putting that insane race in Rio's favela? And it worked perfectly. It became one of the most iconic sequences." Paul raised his index finger, remembering proudly. "Okay, let's work then. In the 8th film, you need to surprise in a way nobody is expecting. The audience already knows what to expect. Impossible cars, gigantic explosions, chases that defy physics laws. But you have to give a devastatingly strong emotional reason behind all the action." "Like what? Give me something concrete." "Like putting the Toretto family itself in real internal conflict. To make Letty question her choices, doubt if you're still the man she loves. Make Dom Toretto himself seem like he changed sides, that he betrayed everything he believed in. The audience will go completely crazy trying to understand what's happening." Vin raised his eyebrows, intrigued. "Betray the family? That goes against everything we built. It's not real betrayal if it's to protect everyone in the end." Paul winked conspiratorially. "It's that classic old story. Sometimes you have to dirty your own hands, seem like the villain, to keep everyone else clean and safe. It's the supreme sacrifice, your own reputation." "And the action sequences?" asked Vin, now fully entering the creative mood. "What would be the visual differential?" "Man," Paul leaned forward with shining eyes, Put racing cars in a chase on ice, and not just any ice, a gigantic frozen lake, and to complete the madness, a nuclear submarine. Vin started laughing, almost choking with surprise. "You're kidding me." "I'm not at all." Paul smiled with that creative mischief. "The audience loves when you guys break your own established rules. If you've already jumped from planes with cars, if you've already raced between skyscrapers, why not an epic chase on top of a completely frozen lake with war tanks? You're completely crazy. And you know that's exactly why it will work perfectly. It's genius in its insanity." Paul leaned even further forward, with that mischievous gleam in his eyes that Vin recognized from the best creative moments. "But it doesn't stop there, V," he said, lightly patting his friend's shoulder. "You need to create a sequence that makes everyone in the audience say, 'This is physically impossible,' and at the same time not be able to take their eyes off the screen. Now I want details. Imagine the scene. You guys in Iceland racing with military tanks and tuned supercars on top of a gigantic, completely frozen lake. And suddenly, out of nowhere, a nuclear submarine breaks through the ice from below, emerging like a prehistoric monster." Vin widened his eyes, already visualizing the sequence. "That's completely insane and impossible." "Exactly." Paul gave a complicit laugh. "And in the middle of all this visual chaos, you need to create a moment where Dom saves someone that everyone in the audience believes is lost forever. Someone that even the team itself thinks has no way back. But you, being you, never give up." It's starting to make sense. Vin was already mentally assembling the scenes. And who would this person be? It could be a completely new character that connects with the family's story, or even an old enemy who goes through redemption at the last minute. The worldwide audience loves redemption stories of people who change sides for love. Vin nodded, absorbing each suggestion like a sponge. "And V," Paul changed his tone to something more serious and deep. "Between each gigantic explosion, each impossible chase, you can't forget to put small but powerful moments, quick but meaningful dialogues, looks that say more than words. That's exactly what emotionally connects the audience to the Toretto family. Without these human moments, everything becomes just empty noise and special effects." "Got it. Ice, submarine, apparent betrayal, redemption, and dialogues that really matter. Anything else brilliant?" Paul smiled mischievously again. "Oh, and put a sequence of cars jumping from building to building in New York." "Paul, man, we already did that in Abu Dhabi in the 7th film." Vin gave a laugh. "Then do it again. But this time with military helicopters chasing you through the air and drones exploding everything around." Vin laughed loudly, shaking his head in disbelief. "You're really crazy. And you're crazy and talented enough to make all this happen convincingly." Paul stood up, patting Vin's back affectionately. "That's exactly why this franchise is yours, born from your vision. Just never forget, every scene filmed, every movie released, every race on screen takes a little bit of me along, always." The creative moment was interrupted when Vin let out a long, heavy sigh, rubbing his tired face. "Paul, you know all this is beautiful in theory. It's exciting to imagine. But the costs to make a film of this level are completely absurd. With each new production, the numbers rise exponentially. I don't know if it's worth the gigantic financial risk." Paul smiled, that calm and wise smile of someone who no longer measures the value of things by figures or box office numbers. "V, listen carefully to what I'm going to tell you and engrave this in your heart. When the story is genuinely good, when the heart is really present in every frame, money always comes as a natural consequence. It can cost whatever it costs. If the emotion is true, if the family truly believes in what they're doing, the audience will feel that authenticity. And when the audience truly feels, when they get emotional, the rest always resolves itself. It always has been, always will be." Vin stared wordlessly, trying to absorb the simple but profound wisdom. Paul then stood up slowly, adjusting his non-existent jacket, and took 2 measured steps toward the lake. The evening light was getting more golden, more intense. He stopped at the shore, turned and faced him with gentle seriousness. "And always remember, brother, no matter how many impossible cars you drive, how many buildings you jump, or how many enemies you face on screens, the real race, the one that really matters, is in here." He pointed directly at Vin's chest. "It's where you decide who you really are and what legacy you'll leave when you finally cross the final finish line." They remained silent for a few eternal seconds, just looking at each other. Paul opened one last serene smile, full of peace. Now, go there and make real history, V. I'll be there. Whenever you need to look to the side and remember why you started all this. And in the blink of an eye, literally in the time of a heartbeat, he simply wasn't there anymore. Vin sat completely motionless, staring fixedly at the empty space where his best friend had been sitting seconds before. He felt his eyes fill with hot tears, but this time he didn't try to hold back or disguise them. He cried alone there on the lake shore, the sound being muffled by the gentle wind that had returned to blow over the water. When he finally managed to breathe deeply and minimally compose himself, he ran his hands over his wet face, like someone sealing a silent but eternal promise. He carefully stored every tip, every word of encouragement and every smile in his heart, determined to honor not just the franchise they built together, but mainly the brother who would continue living in every scene, in every action, in every family moment. Vin slowly stood up from the bench, still feeling the echo of Paul's words reverberating in his chest like waves in the lake. He walked toward the cabin with initially heavy steps, but which became firmer with each meter, like someone carrying a sacred secret that the world would never completely understand. Opening the wooden door, he found Paloma in the cozy living room, just finishing hanging up the phone. She looked at him with that sharp feminine intuition, immediately noticing that something had changed in his expression. "Who were you talking to out there for so long?" she asked softly, drying her hands on a kitchen towel. "I heard voices." Vin breathed deeply, and for the first time in months, a genuine and complete smile slowly formed on his lips. "With Walker." Paloma frowned for a brief second, processing the answer, but something in her husband's expression prevented her from asking more questions. Instead, she approached with careful steps, placed her delicate hands on his tense shoulders, and without saying a single word, pulled him into a tight and prolonged embrace. It was at that instant that Vin could no longer hold back the repressed emotion. Tears came abundantly, silent but liberating, falling on the shoulder of the woman he had chosen to share his life with. She lovingly stroked his bald head and whispered with all the tenderness in the world, "Everything's going to be okay, my love. Everything will be fine." And for the first time since that cursed November day when he lost his brother, Vin truly believed those simple but powerful words. From that impossible encounter by the lake, something fundamental changed in Vin Diesel's essence. The excruciating pain didn't completely disappear. It probably never would, but it gained a greater purpose, a direction, a meaning that transcended mourning. Vin returned to sets with completely renewed energy, bringing in his determined gaze and warmed heart every precious piece of advice Paul had given him that magical evening. And then, exactly as predicted, the franchise literally exploded in worldwide success. More films came, each progressively more daring and emotionally impactful than the previous one. The ideas born by the lake, the chases on ice, the submarine emerging from the depths, the family's internal conflicts, the redemption stories, were all carefully implemented. Success came in gigantic waves, dragging excited crowds to cinemas worldwide and keeping alive, in every carefully filmed scene, the eternally young spirit of Paul Walker. Because deep in his heart, Vin knew a simple but absolute truth. His soul brother still raced beside him in every dangerous curve, still smiled at every action, still was part of the family they built together, forever. And you, who accompanied us here on this emotional journey, what did you think of this impossible but touching story? If one day you could talk, even for a few precious minutes, with someone special who has already departed, what would you ask? What would be the last conversation you'd like to have? Do you think Vin Diesel was right to continue with the Fast and Furious franchise, honoring his friend's memory, or should he have ended everything at the emotional peak of the 7th film? Leave your sincere comment, share this video with Fast and Furious fans, or simply anyone who believes in the power of connections that transcend death, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next exciting stories we're going to tell. Thank you for accompanying us on this journey through the dimensions of the impossible. And always remember, some friendships are bigger than life itself, and true love never knows a final period.